We're back with Joe DeLoach, and this is going to be our Raiders segment. You started covering the Raiders in 1978, but you were a fan. Tell people what Frank Ewell Field is.
That's right. 17,000 people. I saw a game there. The last game. This is incredible. Last game of the '63 season. It was George Blanda was the quarterback of the Houston Oilers, and the Raiders had two quarterbacks, Tom Flores and Cotton Davidson, and that was Al Davis's first year as coach. And the game was 35-35 at halftime, and it ended up 53-49. A guy by the name, the Raiders kicker was Mike Mercer. He had a bar in Alamo called the Point After.
Okay.
And yeah, he kicked, but Flores threw, I think he threw either 6 or 7 touchdowns in the game. 6 to Art Powell. Art Powell was a wide receiver, and when Flores became coach in '79, that was my first full-time year on the Raiders. One day after practice, I just told him, I said, I was at that game where you threw 6 TD passes. So he remembered that, and it was good. He's a really nice guy.
Yeah. Years ago, I used to see Flores over at St. Stephen's Church in Walnut Creek.
He used to live in Lafayette, but it's up on the hill there.
No, I know exactly, off Withers. Exactly.
Yeah.
Over by they tore it down, but the Bonnie Bray Swim Club there. Yeah, and no, that's the time, because at the time the players and the coaches lived with the fans. I mean, they didn't make much more.
What made the '70 Raiders so great in the community is they were a team of the people. Exactly. You would see them in bars and restaurants, and they weren't pretentious at all. You meet somebody who used to go to Raider games in that time period, and you mention one name. You mention, like, oh, yeah, I used to cover them. I knew John Matuzak. I knew Kenny King. I knew
Lester Hayes.
And he goes. Then they start telling stories of how they were in a bar one night and they saw this guy. It was great stories.
Exactly. But at the time, people don't even realize that the NFL, they weren't making a lot of money. In fact, most of these guys worked in the off season. I mean, they were like school teachers.
Yeah, they had to get. Ben Davidson was one of the first players that kind of marketed himself.
Right.
He did commercials for IHOP.
Oh, IHOP. Okay.
Yeah. And now the culture and the money, it's been so different in the last 20 years.
What's your memories of covering a team up in Santa Rosa for training camp?
I can't talk.
Well, we got to keep. Anything you can keep PG?
Well, I'll tell you that on the last night of training camp, they would have a parade down Santa Rosa Boulevard. They would get all these convertibles, and they'd get whatever women they had, and they sit in the cars. And I became friends with Mark Wilson, who was a quarterback for the LA Raiders. And the last year, the Raiders they trained in Santa Rosa in '82, and then there was a court decision, and they played at the LA Coliseum, but they trained in Oakland. But the training camp was in Santa Rosa. And one night, Mark said, meet me at 11 o'clock. That was curfew. We sat out in the bushes, and about 10:55, all these cars come streaming in the parking lot. Players running into their rooms. Suddenly the lights go out. You see the whomever, they were, equipment guys walking around with flashlights, making sure everybody's in the bed check. As soon as the bed check is over, lights come out, doors come open, women come in
Okay, I got you.
From their cars. I was amazing.
Yeah.
Just amazing. So, but there I'm sitting with the quarterback,
in the bushes.
Quarterback of in the bushes at the El Rancho Tropicana Hotel. Al Davis he wanted the players to be comfortable in training camp, so he always had he had a hotel. One's a funny story here. I was working at the West County Times in the early '90s, and I was covering a girls' basketball playoff game at, where was it? In Napa. And I needed a place to file. So what I would do, I'd try to find a hotel because they always had telephones. So I found the Napa Valley Marriott. And I'm in there, found this payphone, dictated my story, and I'm waiting for it to be read. And I look outside, there's this middle school. I didn't know it was a middle school, but they had this big athletic field. And I said to myself, God, this would be a great place for a football training camp. This would have been 93. Raiders came back in 95. Guess where they
should have given you a
the
finder.
middle school closed. They bought the land, and to this day, that's where they train.
They should give you a finder's fee.
They should. Yeah. No, it's amazing. So, yeah.
I'm trying to think other things. The 79, I think you were covering the home games. And then
no, I started traveling to 78.
Okay.
78, I covered the home game.
Right.
79, I started going to practice, and that's where you really, really got. One day, I put this on Facebook after Ken Stabler passed away.
Okay.
One Monday, I'm walking after practice. Tuesday, typically the players' day off. So Monday, that's their night. They go out drinking, okay? And nobody's in the locker room after Monday practice. It's about 6 o'clock. I'm walking in there, and Cliff Branch, he's coming out of the shower. He's got a towel on. He says, hey, let's have a drink on Kenny. I said, what do you mean? They had this Gatorade cooler. We got 2 cups, fill it with Gatorade, walked over to Stabler's cubicle. He reaches on the top shelf, pulls out a bottle of Jack Daniels. Pours the Jack Daniels in 2 cups, and we had a little drink on stage. And I had to go back to the office and write a story.
Okay, yeah, but that was, you're in the clear. That was a long time ago. I'm trying to think. No, that's just amazing. How many people were covering the Raiders back then?
Not that many. And the other thing is, in around 78, when Al Davis got in his disagreements with the
Pete Rozelle
county, Alameda County, and and LA was Al was convinced that broad sports on television was going to pay-per-view. That's why he wanted to go to LA. To some degree that happened with the cable, but it never happened the way he thought it. And the thing is, once the Raiders got down to LA, a lot of bad things happened to them. The team won the Super Bowl in '83, but that team was essentially the same team that won it in '80.
It was basically the Oakland Raiders.
Yeah, they were assembled in Oakland, and then after that, no, the Raiders were notorious, to this day, they're notorious for fabricating their announced attendance. And the fans stopped coming to the games in LA, and you got the Latino factor in there. There's a lot of fan violence developed down there, and a lot of bad things happened to the Raiders.
Let me ask you this: in the '70s, the Raiders were tough. The fans were tough. But there were
no problems. There weren't any problems.
There was no fight. So that all started in Los Angeles.
I know. I went to, in '82, I was covering Stanford, and a friend of mine had Raiders season tickets, and it was a strike game between the Raiders and the Chargers, and I just saw all these people dropping F-bombs on each other and fights in the stands, and I mentioned to him, I said, these aren't the Raider fans I remember.
Right, okay. Yes,
the Oakland crowd was tough, but
right, no,
they were real football fans.
Respectful.
Yeah. No, you never had,
Well, so it's not just the Raiders. There's a culture in our society. People
but
go to.
Before we get off the Raiders, I got to tell you this one story.
Go ahead, Joe.
1979. Yeah, my first year, of course. Al Davis hired this linebacker coach from the Broncos, Merle Moore. Broncos, when they got the Super Bowl in '77, they did they had a 3-4 defense where they had 4 linebackers.
The Orange Crush.
Yeah, and so what Davis would do, if one of the rivals, the Chiefs or the Chargers, Broncos had success, he'd he'd try to get their player or their coach. Well, he hired this assistant coach. So they went from a 4-3 defense to a 3-4 in 79. The odd man out was a middle linebacker by the name of Monty Johnson, who was on the Super Bowl team. And Phil Villapiano went from the inside to the outs. He went from the outside linebacker to an inside. So right before the season started, they finalized the starting lineups, and Johnson was out, Villapiano was in. I'm talking to Villapiano. The entrance to the training camp, there's no security in these days. It's like a trailer, and players come out. So there's this little ramp there, and Phil didn't want to talk to anybody, but I saw him walking out. I went, and he lived in San Ramon, and he got the paper, so we had a pretty nice relationship. So I'm talking. How do you feel about, replacing a teammate and everything? Next thing I know, John Matuzak picks me up, holds me above his head. He can't answer that question. And he sits me down and says, "Okay." Okay.
Yeah, I guess so.
But since I held my ground, I didn't get in. You're not getting an argument with Tuesday, 6'7". From that day on, we were buds.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay.
Yeah, it's a great story.
I think we'll take a break here. We'll come back. Well, we'll do more.